You're listening to the Red Man Podcast.
Welcome back to the Red Man Podcast. Today, again, we have with us Chris Mosley, Associate Certified Entomologist, Tripp Brewer, and myself, Kolby Krohn.
Yep, it's good to be back with you guys today, and we actually have a little bit of news before we jump into this. Kolby introduced me as the Associate Certified Entomologist, but things have changed since our last episode because I need to welcome these two guys to the club. Tripp and Kolby have both passed their ACE exam and are now full-fledged Associate Certified Entomologist as well. So congrats to both of you guys.
Thank you.
Needed to make sure that we at least said something to acknowledge that. That's a big accomplishment, especially in the pest control industry. It's a pretty prestigious thing to have that ACE certification.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, we're real proud of it.
Definitely feels like the sun's a little brighter when I wake up every day now, so it's
Well,
pretty
that's
cool
good.
thing. It is a good thing to have, and it kind of backs up, hopefully, some of the information we're providing here, gives a little bit more credibility to it. Certainly glad to have that kind of behind us.
Yeah. It's awesome.
And now with you guys added, the Red Pest Solutions now has a total of 6 entomologists on staff, which is a big deal to us
it's
because,
pretty
as you said, we want to have that kind of knowledge in our corner when we send our associates out to service homes and businesses every day. So, again, kudos to both of you guys for doing that.
Yeah, the best part is you can see the stats above the bugs now.
That's right.
That's crazy. I didn't believe you, but as soon as I passed the test, I saw a bug and it was like, it told me exactly what it was.
There you go. So today's episode is our second one, and we're going to cover pollinators, which is going to be pretty prevalent when you're out and about here pretty soon as the temperatures begin to rise and things warm up. On today's show, we're going to do kind of like we did last time. We've got 3 different segments. Kolby Krohn will get us started off with a segment about how PC operators can reduce exposure to pesticides for pollinators. Tripp will cover our news segment. He actually has a really interesting article. I thought it was very interesting. He found out something about, we'll just call them bee bandits. I don't want to spoil it or steal his thunder. He'll tell us a little bit more about that. And then at the end on our entomology segment, I will talk a little bit about the impressive annual journey of the Monarch butterfly. And not only give you a little biology and information about them, but also how you can help them out. And I'm talking about not only pest control operators, but the general consumers or people that are just interested in entomology that may be listening to this episode. There are things that you can do to help the Monarch butterfly out. So stay tuned to not only hear that, but also the sound. We have a sound bite of millions of monarch butterflies flying at once. So hang around for that. But as I said, we're going to get started now. I want to turn this over to Mr. Kolby Krohn, ACE.
ACE. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that introduction for everybody. So we talk about pollinators, and you hear the buzzword all the time, right? Pollinators. But why do we need to protect them? But first and foremost, being professionals in the industry as a pest control operator, it's our responsibility to protect the environment. And one big part of that is to protect the pollinators and being mindful of how we apply pesticides to not adversely affect them and their environments. So I'm going to kind of go through a couple rapid fire topics as far as what we can do, how we can educate technicians to do effective practices. And at any point, feel free to kind of jump in and let's have a discussion on some of these, because some we think about a lot and some you may not think about.
And I'm glad we're covering this because there's a lot of newer people in the pest control industry, but there's also a lot of old hats out there. And now there was a time years ago where there wasn't a lot of thought put to this, and people just and when I say people, I mean pest control operators. They went out and they did their treatments, and they didn't really give a lot of thought to pollinators. Now that has since changed, so I think this is actually a very important topic. So I'm interested to hear what you've got.
Absolutely. So one of the first items to be considerate of here in South Mississippi, where we're located at, we are at the end of winter, heading into springtime. And what happens in springtime? We get a lot of rain and flowers start blooming. Insects become very populous. It gets busy. And flowers, of course, with pollinators and other vegetating plants are a key part of that process. So as pesticide applicators, we need to be cognizant of where those plants are, where that vegetation, where those flowering plants are, and not apply product point number one, do not apply product to flowering plants.
Right.
So when we're educating technicians and training them from day one, we're talking about, hey, you're doing that perimeter treatment with your power sprayer. Maybe you're doing a spot or localized treatment around somebody's flower garden, around their shrubbery in the front that's flowering, things like that. Don't spray it if you don't have a good reason to. Avoid that area. Use a granular product, a more safe product for that zone versus applying the liquid pesticide, because if you get it on that flowering plant, those bees, butterflies, other things that do pollinate will come in contact with that just by nature and will be affected by that product and will actually kill them off.
Absolutely.
And so what we don't want to do is reduce that population, because what pollinators do for us is they pollinate other flowers, pollinate to vegetation, our crops that we eat, and is a big part of our food source in the country. And the more effectively they're able to do their job, the better quality and the more abundant our crops will be. So it really trickles down. It has a very big impact on our global supply chain and what products we're able to produce and eat. So that's point number one, and that's pretty important. So another item in which that you can focus on is the time of day in which you're applying products.
This is one I don't even really think about. So this is a good one.
Yeah. So the EPA, which is the governing body over all pesticide products that are on the market, they create the labels and they determine, when you should apply products, how much, things of that nature. Their recommendation is when it's pollinating season, springtime, summer, early summer, if you are in an area, maybe you're at a honeybee farm and you have to treat for something, or maybe you're at some sort of agricultural facility, make sure that you're adhering to time of day restrictions. And what that means is you really should be applying product only before dawn or after dusk, so early in the morning and late in the evening. And what that does is your pollinators really aren't going to be out until the middle part of the day when it's nice and warm. The sun's out shining. They're getting active and they're going out and about to do their jobs every day, which is to pollinate.
I remember back when during summertime when I was younger, I'd go outside because I didn't have school, and you go out and I remember you'd wake up and you wouldn't see anything, but as you go out throughout the day, man, you'd start seeing butterflies and bees and all this stuff, and they'd really, really take off during the middle part of the day. So definitely just easy to see.
That's true. I mean, like I said, that's a good point. I have never really thought about that before. But that's why we're going over it, because I'm sure there are tons of other people that have never thought about that. But that is absolutely a good way to avoid, giving exposure to pollinators.
And so the way I like to think about it is if you're an operator and you have a special needs account, so to speak, that has a concern with this, or you observe that it could be a concern at this location, maybe you put a note on that account. Maybe you make a special notation to say, hey, look, we really need to try and put this one first thing in the day or late in the afternoon, rather than just haphazardly filling them throughout your schedule, because it's something to be respected. I mean, you want to make sure that we're doing everything possible, and that's an easy one. Not spraying the flowers or the vegetation if you don't have to, and then adhering to a time of day restriction. Just those two things, they really don't cost you any extra money to do that, nor does that affect any of your other operations. It's just something to think about. So if you educate, you talk about it with your people, bring it up on a regular basis, they'll make it part of their habit. When you're out riding with them, doing training sessions, things of that nature, bring it up, make it known, especially for the newer folks. And hey, maybe you make it a company policy. Maybe you have a special category for that type of customer. But at the end of the day, those are two of the big ones. Another item that can be taken advantage of is just a reduction in the rate in which pesticide is even applied in the first place. Mm-hmm. So are we over applying pesticides? That's a hot topic right now. Whether you're talking about liquid pesticides or we even get into the rodent world, certain states at the state level are combating pesticides on a lot of fronts and trying to reduce the amount in which we apply it. And that's unfortunately due to some bad apples out in the industry that are misusing these products. And I think if we as a collective, PCOs around the country, can do a better job of showing our restraint and our knowledge in the field and how to protect these different ecosystems, we won't have so much restriction put on us. So that's a very big one, just reducing the amount we're applying. And actually, that one will have a positive effect on your bottom line because less product usage means less money spent.
You stole my thunder there. That's exactly what I was going to say. You kind of get two benefits from doing that or taking that approach.
Yep. So next area of concern, and I'll make this point, there's a big difference between agricultural pest control and residential pest control. And while here at Red, we are almost entirely residential and commercial pest control, in the commercial sector, and it's worth mentioning, there's a lot of good practices that can be taken upon as well, and that is using vegetative filter strips. Do either one of you know what that is?
I don't.
So I've learned a little bit about this in past months with some of my courses I'm taking, but it's actually where you leave an area, whether that be in a crop field or even in some public parks are even doing it now around the country, where you don't cut the grass, you don't put, I guess, like a fertilizer down.
Really?
You don't put pesticides out, and you leave little pockets that are specifically for pollinators. It's just like a pollinator home, so a safe space, so to speak. And it's actually becoming very prominent in the agricultural sector because it's actually not only helping the pollinators, but it's actually yielding better crop results because of this safe space.
So what you're saying is I actually have a really good excuse to give my wife to not cut the grass.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
You have a very good rebuttal now. It's helping the pollinators, babe.
Yeah.
I've actually seen, actually on the way here today, I actually saw there was a big plot of just flowers and stuff, and it was just in front of somebody's house, and it showed on it, this area is for pollinators, don't treat it with pesticides, don't cut it. It's actually interesting that, even residential places are starting to,
It actually, it does make a lot of sense. I can see where aesthetically it may not be
right
always, the best thing. And so I guess it depends on where you're putting it.
Well, it's pretty cool that, it seems like a lot of work, the ones I've seen for residential. Commercial, it makes total sense. You wouldn't even know that's what it is if you didn't, help develop it. But for residential and parks, it's actually pretty cool. They still cut the grass, right? But they cut it in such a way that it's almost like art. They make like a design or like a checkerboard pattern, and it really looks cool. So it doesn't look like you've neglected it.
So you do still have to cut the grass.
Correct, but like you leave patches, like perfectly square patches.
Sounded a little too good to be true.
Yeah, he gave me hope, and then he just snatched it away.
You would still be reducing the amount of time you have to cut the grass if you boil it down. But it's still pretty cool. I think that's something that you're going to see more of because it's becoming very popular. But us as applicators, like I said, more so on the residential side rather than the agricultural. Either way, it's a big, very important topic to consider and educate yourself. There's tons of videos and things out there you can look up regarding that, and the more you learn about it, the more you're going to be able to envelop it into your practices at your business. So, the last item that I have, and this is one that we do talk about a lot, probably more so than any of the other ones that we've mentioned thus far, and that is being considerate of spray drift when you're applying pesticides. So what does spray drift mean? When you're applying a liquid pesticide of any kind, aerosol, power sprayer out of your B&G, really anything, even the dust, you need to be considerate of a drift. But when the wind is blowing above a certain speed, most labels will actually advise you not to put out the product at all. So you may be trying to get finished up for the day, finish the job, but man, the wind's really whipping. What do I do here? Maybe you have some other products you can use in lieu of a liquid product that would have drift issues. But once again, always refer to that label. I'm not going to mention a specific wind speed here other than saying really over 10 miles per hour. You certainly shouldn't. But each product's different. And it all comes down to the pressure in which you're using the product out of your sprayer, what product it is. And so I'll just refer everybody regarding what product you're using. Just read the label. The label is the law, and it's going to give you that information regarding spray drift. But the reason that's a concern is you apply product, the wind's blowing, you're intending for it to be in spot A, but it ends up in spot B, whether that be on some flowers nearby or maybe even in the neighbor's yard in a tomato garden or something of that nature, and that could be a big issue for a PCO.
Well, that's some fantastic information there. And like I said, I've been doing this a long time. There were things there that you mentioned that I had never thought of before. So as I said, and when we started this podcast, we kind of said in the very beginning that not only are we wanting to target consumers and people that are interested in entomology, but also hopefully give some good information to pest control operators out there. And that was certainly some good information. So thank you, Kolby, for that. And at this point, we'll move into our news segment with Mr. Tripp Brewer. As I said, I think I coined this phrase. I just want to.
Well, yeah,
it's about bee bandits.
Bee bandits.
So
there you go.
tell us about bee bandits, Tripp.
So as I was researching different types of articles, I came across this one, and me and you talked about it some, Chris, as we looked over it. And this one was the one that caught our eye because it's pretty fascinating.
Right.
We know about different types of insects, attacking each other in the insect world. You know about ant colonies and termite colonies constantly going at it, and ants versus ants. But you don't really think about just straight up just theft when it comes to certain insects. And today I'm going to talk about. So there's some honeybees in Italy they've found that will regularly steal pollen off the backs of bumblebees.
Wow.
Which is just interesting to think about. So as we know, honeybees rely on plant pollen as a protein-packed food source, and some are even willing to steal from other bees to get it. Now, this is an article by Darren in Corvia, and as he goes through, he talks about some of the pollen stealing and how it's been seen in the United States before. But now researchers in Italy have also observed honeybees snatching pollen off the backs of bumblebees. The observations published in December of 21 are among the most extensive documentation of bee-on-bee larceny to date.
Bee larceny.
Yeah, I like that. He thinks like you. It's no bee bandit.
Right.
It's no bee bandit, but bee-on-bee larceny is pretty good. On a summer trip in 2019 to Mountain Tola in the northern Italian region of Liguria, independent naturalists recorded video of what they thought was honeybees trying to push bumblebees off flowers of a woolly thistle. So they're looking at these bumblebees, and if you go look at the video, it looks like they're trying to push them off these flowers.
So at first it looked like it looked or appeared to be aggravated assault.
Yeah.
And then we upped the ante to grand larceny.
Grand larceny,
Okay.
yeah.
All right,
So it
keep
just
going.
looked like they were defending some territory, but, as they took a close look at the video, they revealed that it wasn't the case. It wasn't a case of competitive harassment. It was full-blown robbery. So the red-tailed bumblebees scrounge around the flowers, and they're going for the nectar and the pollen, and the pollen gets stuck to their hairy bodies. The naturalists in the area witnessed the honeybees shamelessly snagging this pollen for themselves. The thieves tended to target male bumblebees slightly more than females, as the males appeared less bothered by the bees coming up and stealing off of them.
So what are your thoughts on that? They're targeting the males and not the females. Why do you think that is?
They're gentlemen. They would never.
I think there would probably be some more repercussions if they went after.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking, Colby. It may have been. I don't know. They probably got a lot more kickback if they went after trying to steal from the females. Maybe
They're just gentlemen. They're gentlemen. That's what I'm thinking. They would never harm a lady. But these honeybees are well known as pollen pigs.
Pigs.
Yeah, this is from a biologist at Missouri State.
I like bee bandits better, but pollen pigs isn't bad.
Whose name drops pollen pig? You walk in, it's like, pollen pig. That's a good one for it. But that must be an entomologist thing.
I was going to say that's some of that Missouri State stuff right there.
So stealing pollen off the backs of these bumblebees, the pollen pigs, he says, it doesn't seem far-fetched. To see how common the criminality is, the researchers went back to the scene twice in the following 3 years and also observed bees at two other sites about 25 kilometers away. Now, this is actually interesting. Mm-hmm. More interesting than I think the other part, because honeybees at these other sites were not stealing from bumblebees. So 25 kilometers away, they observed bumblebees, and they're all in the same spot, same flower, but no stealing, no theft. But the bees at the first site that they noticed are still continuing their larceny year after year. For instance, honeybees collected pollen from only 3 of the 31 flowers the researchers observed in 2021, but stole from 28 of the available 66 bumblebees. Scrutinizing the differences between the sites, the researchers suspect honeybees resort to theft in areas where pollen is hard for them to get flowers. The honeybees struggled to collect pollen from the woolly thistle, but there were plenty of other bees around where they could steal from.
Huh.
That's interesting.
There's a lot of analogies you could take from that.
Yeah.
Comparing it to the human world, huh? Less resources in an area, so theft is on the rise. I wonder if there's a correlation in our world, right?
Well, I think it's
that same thing.
Yeah, it's the path of least resistance type of thing.
In the bee world, they were in the bad part of town. There were some bee bandits in that part of town.
Bandits.
That's all I'm saying. I'm sticking with that.
Pollen stealing by honeybees has previously been observed in North America, first in Kansas and later in California and Indiana. Discovering the behavior in Italy suggests that this might be a global crime spree. Russell says it would be nice to learn whether pollen theft negatively impacts bumblebees or the flowers that they pollinate. He's also curious if other bee species ever steal pollen as well. We do notice that in the hive, bumblebees will nibble at each other's pollen baskets, he says. So there you go.
I
go.
liked that story. Now, I heard a rumor. I'm just going to go ahead and bust him out. I heard a rumor that you didn't like that story, Kolby.
I mean,
you thought it was too silly.
I think it points a negative finger at bumblebees.
Oh,
you know.
Is that
Well,
what?
honeybees. Now.
Honeybees. I'm sorry. What I will say though is he was questioning were there other species of bees that did this. I'm not sure of other species of bees, but I do know of another species that does steal from bees, and that is some species of hornets. They will actually attack bee colonies and just go ahead and steal the honey and pollen and things of that nature, and eventually will wipe out the colony because it kind of deteriorates from there.
Well, maybe the honeybees learned it from the hornets.
Maybe they did. They're like, you know what? They're pretty successful at doing this.
You ever seen A
We should
Bug's
turn
Life,
around.
man?
Yeah.
It's just bugs are just stealing from each other, man. It's a whole survival of the fittest down there.
It's a dog eat dog world in the
bug eat bug world.
Was that part of your study material for the ACE?
But yeah, I watched
Okay.
The Bug's Life. I watched A Bug's Life. That's what helped me pass.
All right. Well,
Sure is.
Well, interesting nonetheless. So moving on, we're going to go into our entomology segment here and talk about, I think it's probably one of the most recognizable pollinators out there. We're going to talk about the monarch butterfly. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is the butterfly with its orange and black markings across its wings. It's very, very recognizable. Before we get into their cross-continental journey, I was going to give you a little bit of information on the biology of the monarch butterfly. So they have full metamorphosis, egg, larva. Well, the larva would be the caterpillar. Pupa would be cocoon, and the adult. So that's full metamorphosis for the monarch butterfly. Females lay between 100 to 300 eggs during her life, and the eggs hatch about 4 days after being laid. When larvae first hatch, they're less than a centimeter and grow to be about 5 centimeters in 10 to 14 days. In 8 to 15 days of time, it will emerge from its cocoon as a full-grown adult monarch. And monarch butterflies typically live from 2 to 6 weeks, except for the last generation of the year, which can live up to 8 to 9 months, which is really the generation we're going to be talking the most about here in just a second. The bright orange color serves as a warning to any potential predators that they're poisonous. In the event that some curious predator does decide to eat one, it only takes that one time for them to learn their lesson. The monarch, as you can imagine, I've never tasted one, but it's extremely bitter, not pleasant to eat at all. So another thing that this insect is probably more known for is the incredible journey, the annual journey that it takes across the continent of North America. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Not just because it's interesting, and it is interesting, but also because over the past 20 years, there has been a decline in monarch populations. And frankly, they're at a point now where they kind of need our help. Every fall, these insects carry out one of the most impressive cross-continental treks in the entire animal kingdom. The trip is somewhere over 3,000 miles from Canada through the United States and all the way down into Mexico. And as you can imagine, a trip that long would be pretty grueling. A real test for a creature that is as small as the monarch butterfly. I mean, it'd be a test for any creature of any size. But when you consider they're small and just what a tiny creature it is, it has to be tough. The only way that they can survive a trip like that is they have to make, of course, multiple stops along the way. Now, the monarch is going to be looking for sites with abundant nectar and also shelter to escape the harsh elements of the trip. The eastern population returns to the same 15 to 20 mountain ranges and forestry areas in Mexico every single winter. These sites, and this is crazy, but it hosts, over more than 20 million monarch butterflies per roost. That's a lot of butterflies.
That is a lot of butterflies.
It's hard to even comprehend. You pair that with how far from Canada to Mexico.
20 million butterflies. That's a lot. And the combination of a loss of habitat, pesticides that Kolby spoke about earlier, urban development, and of course climate change, and even illegal logging in areas have all contributed to the risk that these butterflies now face today And we were talking about just how many butterflies is 20 million butterflies. It's a lot. And actually, I have a clip here that I want to share, a little sound bite of what 20 million monarch butterflies, what they sound like all at once flying at the same time. So here's this clip so you can kind of hear what that is. And then when it's over, I want you to tell me what you think it sounds like. So 20 million butterflies. What does that sound like to you?
So to me, it either sounds like one of two things. It kind of sounds to me like rain on some trees out in a forest somewhere, or like a streaming brook in a forest. Like just a very soothing. I could go to sleep to that.
Yeah, I could too, actually.
I think in the distance, and this is going to tickle Colby's funny bone, but it kind of sounds like a train about to run through. Just
Yeah, Colby's obsessed with trains. So I think Tripp's taking a dig at him. But to me, honestly, it sounded to me like a waterfall kind of.
A little bit.
But you're right. It did kind of sound like rain and trees.
It does sound like water,
I get that too. But anyway, 20 million butterflies flying at once. Obviously, you can't hear one alone flapping around, flapping its wings, flying. But 20 million, you can certainly hear that. So we talked about the eastern migration. Let's talk a little bit about the western migration. They cluster in forests west of the Rocky Mountains to keep warm. And despite these butterflies weighing less than 1 gram each, it's not uncommon for so many of them to land on a tree branch that the weight becomes so great that it actually breaks the tree branches, which again, it's hard to comprehend that when you think about a tiny butterfly and how, I mean, they weigh almost nothing, but you put enough of anything in a certain place. I mean, it's
There's
gonna,
strength in numbers for sure.
Man,
That's a perfect
it seems
exactly.
almost like cartoonish. It's wild.
It may surprise some people to learn that there are actually some monarch butterflies that don't migrate at all. And I didn't know that until I researched this a little bit. The San Francisco Bay Area along the California coastline, now just in this area alone, there are estimates of around 12,000 butterflies that never leave. And there's also a resident population that is found in southern Florida. So you have both coastlines that have some monarch butterflies that don't migrate at all, but these are warm climates.
Right.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
think
say-
so the climate has to play a big role in that because they're like, heck, why do I need to travel to Mexico if I can get it right here? You know?
Yeah.
Right.
I know a lot of species that live in South Florida. They just stay there year round. That's a perfect perfect climate for a lot of insects.
Absolutely. So I said earlier they need our help. And so what can people do to help the monarchs? For one thing, you can plant milkweed for starters. Milkweed is essential for monarch caterpillars to grow and develop. You can also plant any kind of nectar plants for them. Nectar is absolutely crucial for the monarchs. It provides them with the energy needed for not only the long journey, but also breeding and to build the reserves that they need to survive the long winter. Including butterfly-friendly plants in your yard would be a major help. And of course, as Kolby said earlier, not just for pest control operators, but also those do-it-yourselfers out there, you want to avoid using any kind of pesticides on those particular plants. By the way, if you need some ideas on the specifics of what to plant, monarch plant lists can be easily found online with a quick Google search. However, look, we'd be happy to email you a list if you need one. Just reach out to us at the Red Man Podcast at redpest.com. Again, that's Red Man Podcast. That's 2 D's in red. Redman Podcast at redpest.com. So, guys, that's all I've got on the monarch butterfly. Any closing thoughts for today's episode?
Yeah, something I was wanting to mention. I read a research paper a couple weeks back, and it was talking about how for climate change and overall global wellness, the polar bear has been the poster child for many, many years. Mm-hmm. They're going extinct, do this, save the icebergs, all that. Well, the shift in all that thinking is polar bears really aren't doing that much worse now than they have been for years. But like you said, the monarch butterfly is really declining. It's stark how big of a drop off they've had in the past 5 to 10 years.
Right.
So our whole topic today has been primarily focused on the environment, pollinators, and taking care and being responsible at the end of the day. So we want to encourage you all, whether you're an operator or a homeowner, be responsible, utilize people that are responsible, go above and beyond, because we only have one Earth, and we need to take care of it.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
Last thing, make sure you follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Red Man Podcast, Call the Red Man. Email us if you have any comments, topics you'd like to hear about. That's something we'd really like to have for the next episode, is a Q&A session. So we're going to get that rolling. So if you have any questions or comments or things you'd like covered, definitely email us at the Redman Podcast at redpest.com. And if you have a pest issue in the Mississippi, Louisiana, or Alabama markets, call the Red Man.
Call the Red Man. Call the Red